long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jack McCurry of the North Coast Sports. How you doing tonight, Jack?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing?
Oh, day off from work, which is unusual for a Monday, but I'll take it. I won't complain. It's been a long 4 days at work. Saturday night I had to stay till 2 a.m. because we were without power, so of course I got stuck dealing with all that. But other than that, it was another rough weekend, both first with the Buckeyes and of course with the Browns. But we're here to talk Browns, and we're gonna break down this game for you guys here, and we're also gonna discuss all the rumors swirling around with Hue Jackson. But before we get to that, let's start off with the game. The Browns lost 26-23 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in overtime, their fourth overtime game of the season. They are 1-2-1 in overtime games this year. So the record could be completely different if they win those overtime games, but unfortunately the record is what it stands at now. So Jack, looking at this game, before we get into the specifics, what was your overall takeaway from another Browns overtime loss?
It was what most of these first 7 games have been this year. The first half has been pretty boring. The offense can't seem to get into a good rhythm, and they can't put points on the board, and it makes you angry, and it makes you think the Browns are going to blow this game, with the exception of the Chargers game, because obviously that game was put away pretty much at halftime. But, in the second half yesterday, the offense made good adjustments. Obviously, the defense forced more turnovers, and the Browns rallied again. They were down 14 at one point, and they came back, tied the game, and sent it into overtime. And, you feel optimistic that they're going to get it done because the momentum's their way. And then something happens that, costs them the game. And that was the same way yesterday. Jabril Peppers, who has been picking it up on the special teams return game, was having a solid return that was going to put us into Buccaneers territory or pretty close to it, give us a chance to win, and he fumbles. And then, obviously Tampa moved the ball up just enough for Catanzaro to hit that long field goal, which I didn't even think he was going to have a shot at making, and unfortunately he did.
Yeah, the game got to overtime yesterday because he missed an extra point. He missed a 40-yard field goal at the end of regulation, and he misses from what are extra points now? 42 yards, and then he missed a 40-yarder at the end of regulation, and then he goes on and makes a 59-yarder to win the game. That's just how it goes for the Browns. I mean, there were a few plays yesterday, like the Baker fumble on 4th and 1 that went backwards out of bounds. There were just a few plays yesterday that just screamed same old Browns, and unfortunately they did lose yesterday. But let's get into Baker Mayfield's performance. Yesterday things started off really slowly, like you talked about, and the first half was maybe the ugliest half of football that they played offensively all season long, and they were still able to put up 26 points. They had a safety to start out the game, but they scored 24 points in the second half. When you look at this offense and Baker Mayfield, there's a trend of it's a slow start in the first half, and in the second half they seem to put everything together. Is that just Baker adjusting to the defenses as the game goes along? Is it the play calling? What do you see it as?
I think it's that. I think it's Baker's, starting out slow. Obviously he's got to adjust to these kind of defenses. Obviously, the Bucs defense looked a lot better yesterday than it did in the first 5 games of their season. And then, he started picking them apart in the second half. And, I think that was due to good field position, obviously, by the turnovers that the defense created. But I also think that, like in the first half, Baker they were really conservative with him. He was doing a lot of short passes. I think he tried to get his receivers into a good rhythm with him, especially Jarvis Landry. But in the second half, you could see he kind of was throwing the ball more downfield. He took a shot with Callaway to the end zone that ended up being a pass interference call, and it moved us up to the 1. He was able to throw the ball into some tight windows yesterday with Njoku or Landry, and he was able to connect. And, I thought Baker, that was one of his better games yesterday. Obviously, he didn't turn the ball over. He got sacked 5 times again, but that's something that's going to be needing corrected in a big way, because he's been sacked 18 times already in his short of 4 or 5 starts already this season. So that's obviously something that's going to need adjusted. And the offensive line play has been really shaky the last couple weeks. But I thought Baker improved really big time in the second half, and so did the offense. And they obviously put us in a position to win the game. It was just too little, too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you mentioned Baker holding on to the ball too much, and is that a product of the receivers not getting open? Is it the offensive line? Because we saw early in the season with Tyrod in those first 2.5 games, he was running into the same issue. He was holding on to the ball too long and taking sacks, just throwing the ball away. So is this a receiver issue that's causing all this?
I think it could be, but I also think, and I see it, like Baker, I don't think he's not getting the process of, throwing the ball away. Sometimes he does, but, the check down process, like you have Nick Chubb, you have Duke Johnson, those guys can make plays with the ball in their hand. Check it down to them. Maybe you get a couple yards, but it's better to get a couple yards than, losing 5, 6, 7 yards on a sack. I mean, that's obviously something Baker needs to learn and develop with as a rookie quarterback in this league, because I don't think he checked down a lot in college at Oklahoma. But, despite that, I've liked what I've seen out of Baker. The turnovers are definitely going to happen, but, he's obviously looking for open receivers. Yeah, sometimes they're not getting open, but you have to check through all your progressions, and if you can't, you either take off and run or you throw the ball away to avoid getting sacked.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do to get rid of it, and unfortunately, there have been many different contributing factors, to him holding on the ball. Speaking about receivers, Jarvis Landry yesterday, after having such a terrible game against the Chargers, there was the game plan was well apparent to get Jarvis Landry the ball early and often. I think on the first drive he had 2 catches, it might have been 3, and you could tell that there was a considered effort to get Landry more involved after that poor game against the Chargers. So what did you think about how Jarvis came out yesterday and responded to the poor performance that he had the week before?
Oh, I thought he bounced back in a big way. He was targeted 3 times on that opening drive. He had 2 quick catches, the first 2 completions of the game. Baker hit him with a 6-yard pass and then a 5-yard pass. And, I think it was important for them to get that flow going between those two, because obviously against the Chargers, I think Jarvis had 2 catches on 10 targets. Right now Landry has to be our number 1 receiver. He's not a number 1 receiver by NFL standards, but unfortunately for the Browns, he has to be that number 1 receiver. But, it was great to see that connection working yesterday. Like I said, he threw a pass to Landry I think a couple times in a tight window. And then obviously that touchdown after Baker had that big 35-yard run late in the game, and that touchdown ended up tying the game. Seeing Landry extend and dive for that ball and then was able to roll into the end zone because no defender had touched him yet. It was a great play on Landry's part. And, to see him have a productive game, I think it's going to boost his confidence. And obviously that chemistry with him and Baker, hopefully it carries on into the game this week against Pittsburgh and through the rest of the season because, Landry's getting paid $14-15 million. And, he's had 100 catches every year. He's the go-to target in this offense. And, Baker needs someone like that, definitely, especially with all the drops that have been going on by the receivers.
When you look at Landry, do you feel that this offense flows more efficiently when he's involved? Because it seems that the energy level changes on offense when Jarvis is more involved in the offense. Is that just everyone else is feeding off of him, or what do you see it as? Because for me, when they're able to get Jarvis the football, the rest of the team responds. I don't know if this just is infectious energy or what it is.
Yeah, I think it is an infectious energy, and I think that, when he makes a play, it kind of relaxes everybody, and then everybody slides into their role on offense, and they do their job. I mean, Landry's that possession guy, and he's the guy that's going to move the chains. If he moves the chains, then, things can open up for, Callaway or Ratley to go downfield, and then it can open the running game, for Chubb or Johnson or whoever's running the ball at the time. If Landry can get the offense moving, then everything, I think, can just settle into place. So, obviously you would like Landry to catch every pass. He was 10 of 15. But, to get him moving, I think this offense will, if he's, making progressions downfield, then everybody's going to be progressing down the field as well.
Jarvis was one of our choices for the top dog poll over on 1085 Gridiron on his Twitter account. And the other guy was David Njoku. He had 4 catches for 52 yards. He had another touchdown this week. That's 2 consecutive weeks with the touchdown. He only dropped 1 pass this week. I have a hard time qualifying that as a drop, but it did hit him square in the hand. So, when you look at Njoku, they've made an effort to get him more involved as well. And you've seen over the last couple of weeks, things have getting better with him. The drops have gone down. What do you think about Njoku and what he's been able to put together the last 2 weeks with consecutive touchdowns in both weeks?
He's been progressing very well, and his chemistry with Baker Mayfield has been awesome. Field Yates of ESPN tweeted it out earlier this morning. In the 4 games Baker Mayfield's been the starter for the Browns, Njoku has 22 catches, 228 yards, and 2 touchdowns. If that was on a 16-game pace, he'd have 88 catches, almost over 900 yards receiving, and 8 touchdowns. We all know that Njoku is a physical freak at the tight end position, and if he keeps, on this trajectory, and he's only 22 years old, and I could see it clearly, and I think other Browns fans could see it as well. David Njoku is going to be a star. He could be another, Jimmy Graham, Rob Gronkowski, Jason Witten type tight end. I mean, obviously the drops are going to be there, but, with his size and his ability and everything about him, I don't see how David Njoku is not going to be one of the top tight ends in football in the coming years.
Absolutely. And you saw on his touchdown, they got him mismatched up against Brett Grimes in the end zone. And, he's going to win that battle every time when he's going up against a quarterback. And, that's great scheme. And if they're able to do more of that with him throughout the rest of the season, he's going to score some more touchdowns, that's for sure. I saw a stat that with Baker Mayfield, Njoku has 22 catches, 228 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And if you equate that throughout the course of 60 games, you're looking at 88 catches, almost 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I'll absolutely take that every single year from Njoku. So I love that Baker is looking for him. He's finding him wide open. And, Njoku's hopefully someone that he could continue to rely on. He has Landry that he can rely on, and hopefully Njoku can be the same for him. To wrap up the offensive talk, yesterday Nick Chubb got his first start, and he was able to do that because on Friday the Browns traded Carlos Hyde to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 5th-round pick in 2019. Jack, I think this came as much of a surprise to all of us when we got the news on Friday that the Browns were trading Carlos Hyde. What was your instant reaction to the trade on Friday?
I was shocked. There was no doubt about that. But I think we could all see it coming. And I think there was hints dropped by Albert Breer last week when he was on with Bull and Fox. He was just like, Nick Chubb's going to get the ball. Don't ask me how they're going to do it, but he's going to get an increased carry. And obviously, I think this was in the works. Jacksonville was needing a running back with Fournette down, and Yeldon was injured somewhat. So Hyde is going to help that team once he steps on the field this week. And the Browns, they picked up another draft pick. They have 3 fifth-round picks now. They might use one of those picks by next week at the trade deadline to get a player that can help this roster immediately. We'll see how that goes out in the next 8 days. But, as for Chubb, I thought he had a great game. He started out slow, and then, as the game went on and he got the ball more, much like Carlos Hyde did when he was here, he started chewing up the Bucs defense, who had some guys down, but you see that explosion. You see how he can rip off 6-7 yards a carry, and showing that athleticism as a running back. And 18 carries for 80 yards. I thought he had a solid performance in his first game. He obviously got in the end zone for a touchdown. All in all, I thought Chubb had a great game.
Yeah, you can see the difference between the two running backs. Chubb has much more of a burst to him. And, when I heard about the trade with Hyde, I was dead on shocked. There was no indication of this whatsoever. So when I saw that they traded him, I like, okay, I guess it's going to be Nick Chubb time. Now, the part about this that bothers me the most with yesterday is that, I think we all assumed that once Chubb was getting traded, this was going to be more Duke Johnson. Well, Duke Johnson yesterday, he had 4 targets in a passing game, and he had 1 carry for -4 yards. That's just unacceptable to me. He had 1 carry with the football. So, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Hopefully, as we continue to move on, they find a way to get Duke more involved. But for him to have only 5 touches yesterday is completely unacceptable to me. The Browns' defense yesterday, they really cracked down in the second half. The score at halftime was 16-2. They only gave up 7 points in the second half, and then the 3 in overtime. So, this defense is continuing to create turnovers. They lead the NFL in takeaways. Jack, I think before the season started, we were all really worried about the defense. Now, they've had issues in stopping teams at critical times, but the way that they've been able to force turnovers this season is something that we absolutely could not have predicted at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, there's no way. If you would have told me they would have 20 turnovers and were leading the NFL through 7 weeks with those turnovers, I would have told you were crazy. But, the added talent that they added to that defensive side of the ball with what the talent was already here, I mean, we knew it was going to be a better defense. I don't think any of us thought it was going to be this good. Obviously, there's things that you wish could be better. You wish some players would give more effort during the whole game. I'm talking to you, Jamie Collins. But, just they were good. They were good yesterday. I mean, yeah, they had a rough start, but they hunkered down in the second half. And, the fact that you had to play another overtime game, the fact that a lot of these guys are playing an 80-plus snap game for the 4th time this season is concerning because there's 9 games to go, and definitely the injuries are going to happen. But, obviously injuries have already happened. We've lost Gaines, we've lost Mitchell, we've lost Schobert, although Schobert and Gaines will be back hopefully this week, maybe next week. Mitchell will be back towards the end of the season, but guys have stepped up and played. Yesterday, Collins and Kirksey stepped up in the linebacker role. I thought they did a decent job. They forced turnovers or created turnovers. Randall moved down to corner yesterday, was okay against Evans. Body Calhoun moved to free safety. I didn't really see him give up any big plays, which he needed a good game like that. And then obviously the guys up front, Myles Garrett, Ogunjobi did their thing. Emmanuel Ogbah, our buddy Jake Burns said it might be Ogbah's best game as a pro, which is a good sign because we were all kind of wondering when Emmanuel Ogbah was going to show up. But he did show up yesterday. But I thought the defense played extremely well, and I'm sure they're really tired so far through 7 games, but they aren't backing down and they're making plays, and that's what we need that defense to do.
Yeah, speaking of being tired, they were on the field for almost 40 minutes yesterday, so you can imagine that defense is completely exhausted. Talk about Ogbah. We talked, I think it was just last week, about how, we haven't heard Ogbah's name called in quite a while, and he sure did show up yesterday. And I think he's finally starting to get healthy for that ankle injury he had at the beginning of the year. So I'm really glad that he's starting to turn around. That Browns defense is much improved when he's out there and healthy and is firing on all cylinders. That defensive line, when you have Garrett, Ogunjobi, and Ogbah all together there, I was really impressed with what those guys did yesterday between the 3 of them. Speaking of defense, they cut a guy at the beginning of the season that was on Tampa Bay yesterday, and that was Carl Nassib. He ended up having 3 sacks. Did the Browns make a mistake of cutting him, or was this just a case of a player playing his former team and just having one of those out-of-body experience kind of games?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, I wasn't happy that they let Carl Nassib go. I thought when Orchard got cut, I thought, that was going to secure Nassib's spot. But obviously they thought the guy from Minnesota, who's not even with the team anymore, I forget his name, but was a better option. And they looked at him on the waiver wire and thought, that would be a good pickup. But Nassib, and it wasn't just the pass rushing. He had 2 sacks, obviously, but he was covering Njoku really well. He broke up a pass, and he was all over that field yesterday. And, I'm sure, he had a little extra boost of energy yesterday to try to, stick it to the Browns for, you cut me, now I'm going to make you pay. But, I thought he had a good game, but, maybe the Browns will regret that in the long run, but I just think he might have had a little extra pep in his step just because it was against the Browns and he wanted to stick it to Greg Williams and John Dorsey.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of seeing him go, but obviously there were tough roster decisions, and I thought some of the other guys that they had lined up would work out, and unfortunately it hasn't yet. So, it's unfortunate that, he had a great game yesterday against the Browns, but he seems like a good dude, good guy, and hopefully he can continue to have a good career down there in Tampa. That's a heck of a defensive line that they have down there as well. Maybe the biggest story out of yesterday, and it seems to be happening every single year, and that is the penalties. The Browns yesterday were penalized 14 times for 114 yards. In comparison, Tampa Bay had 8 penalties for 65 yards. But the biggest topic that came out of all the penalties yesterday was the hit that Baker Mayfield took to the helmet while he was scrambling and sliding. He took a direct helmet-to-helmet hit. They threw a flag, but they picked it up because they said that Baker Mayfield was a runner, therefore he was allowed to be hit in the head. Jack, this to me is one of the most egregious calls I have seen all season. If anything, it should have been 15 yards, personal foul, and an ejection for the player for the new helmet rule that they have rolled out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's, first of all, for the referee, which is Sean Hockley, his dad, Ed, has been a referee forever. I think he just recently retired. But, to do that and to come on and say he's allowed to get hit in the head, like, what the hell were you thinking saying something like that? Anybody, and case in point, and other people brought this up last night again in the Kansas City Cincinnati game. Patrick Mahomes was going out of bounds. He got pushed to the ground. He was still in bounds and went down, and they called a penalty on. It was a roughing the passer penalty or something like that. But they don't call it on Baker Mayfield. And I know a lot of people are thinking that the NFL refs are against the Browns. There's bad calls all over the league. And, it's just time and time again, they continue to do these things to Cleveland. But it's not costing us games per se. It's just it's coincidence that it keeps happening. And, the league keeps putting out these things like, yeah, we should have called the penalty the day after. And it's like, that doesn't make it better, because it could have put the Browns closer in a situation where they could have scored a touchdown. I think that drive, they ended up going for it on 4th and 1 at the goal line and didn't get it. If that run would have happened, add 15 more yards, it would have been 1st and goal for us at the 9. It didn't happen that way, but we still ended up getting down close to the goal line to score anyways. But yeah, these penalties are outrageous all across the board. First of all, the Browns I think this is the 3rd time this season they've had 10 or more penalties in a game. That right there is a strike against the coaching staff, because you keep making these mental mistakes and it keeps costing the Browns points or a chance to extend drives or a chance to kill, or it ends up killing drives for us. And, if we want to be a good team, you got to clean up those mistakes. I know that Kansas City and Green Bay and Pittsburgh are up there with us in terms of penalties, but they also have a strong offense or a strong defense that can bail them out of those. We don't have that just yet, but it's up to the coaches to correct these players on their mistakes, and they can keep saying that they're doing that when they do these press conferences. But until we see otherwise, I have no hope that this coaching staff is disciplining these players enough to stop making stupid mistakes.
The biggest issue I have with that penalty yesterday, and this is gonna sound like a completely biased person, but we all know if that was freaking Tom Brady taking that hit, the whole Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense would have been suspended for something like that. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And the part that really pissed me off about that yesterday is they asked Hue Jackson about it yesterday in the post-game press conference, and this is what he said in regards to the officiating about the game. He said, "I'm not going to get into the officiating. Those guys are doing the best they can. I just think sometimes at key moments for us, things don't go right." Now, after reading that yesterday, I've officially turned to the I'm done with you side. When you don't have any kind of backbone to protect your players, especially your franchise quarterback, you could see that he was frustrated on the sidelines at the officials. But when you don't publicly do it for everybody to hear, like Mike Tomlin did a couple weeks ago, you need to protect your players. And for him just to kind of let it slide and make a comment like that was, to me, absolutely ridiculous.
Well, that's who Hue Jackson is. And, obviously we're going to talk about him at length here coming up, but that's who he is. He, toes the company line, whether it's for the Browns or for the NFL. He's always been this way, going back to Oakland. He doesn't he may care about his players, behind closed doors, but, publicly, he does this. He throws them under the bus. He'll blame them. But, that's who Hue Jackson is. And it's unfortunate. And because I think a head coach is supposed to be the leader of men, and he's supposed to stick up for those people, much like Mike Tomlin did a couple weeks ago. But Hue Jackson clearly doesn't do that. And I think that's why one of the many reasons why the fans don't like him. The players may like him, and the Haslams may like him still, even though that's debatable now. That's how Hue Jackson is, and I think he's never going to change. And that's why I think a lot of people want him out of Cleveland at this point.
Well, let's get into that, because I think that's the most important thing that we're going to talk about today. We did talk about the game, and but before we move on to this stuff, let's do our top dog really quick, just so we can wrap up the game. Yesterday, we put a poll out there and asked who your top dog of the game was. 48% said Emmanuel Ogbah, 39% said Jarvis Landry, 9% said Christian Kirksey, 4% gave it to David Njoku. Jack, who was your top dog of the game yesterday?
I'm going to go with Jarvis Landry. He took a lot of criticism, I think me included, last week in the Chargers game. He, from his play on the field to his attitude off the field, I think he was one of those guys that, skipped the media session and left the stadium early. But and it was nice to see that he came back this week, had a good game, got the offense flowing early, made a big touchdown catch to tie the game, and was Baker's go-to target and the target that Baker could depend on. And, that's why Jarvis Landry's here. That's why the Browns are paying him all that money. It was good to see Juice, bring the juice and help the Browns offense get back into the game on Sunday.
For me, it's Ogbah. Like I said, we talked about last week. We asked where he was. I was about ready to put him on one of those missing milk cartons. And, he showed up in a big way yesterday. So I'm really impressed. And Ogbah gets my top vote. And the fans seem to agree with me as well. So that's our top dog for this week. And, with that, our game coverage of yesterday is officially wrapped up, so we'll jump into the Hue stuff now. Yesterday after the game, rumors started to swirl that Jimmy Haslam and D. Haslam are both displeased with everything that's been going on. Everybody was on full-on red alert about there potentially being a change at head coach. Yesterday or today, but that didn't happen. So it appears, we'll have at least one more week of Hue Jackson as the head coach of this team. Jack, when rumors are starting to swirl like this, you can see that the end is near. With Hue Jackson, how long do you think he has left, and is he going to be able to make it to the bye week, in your opinion?
Honestly, the rumors have already started, and I would not be shocked if it depending on how Sunday's game against Pittsburgh goes, and obviously we'll talk about the Pittsburgh game later this week, but say the Browns get blown out, which, let's look, they haven't won in Pittsburgh since 2003. They haven't won a road game that's, I think, it's 24 consecutive games. It goes back to the Josh McCown 456-yard game against Baltimore in 2015. I mean, it's not looking good. And, the fact that those rumors are out there and, add in the fact that Hue Jackson threw another guy under the bus yesterday in the postgame, it will not shock me if Sunday night or Monday morning we hear that the Browns fired Hue Jackson. Obviously, John Dorsey's patience is wearing thin. It's apparent now that it sounds like Jimmy Haslam's patience is wearing thin. You look at it. Hue Jackson's record as the Browns coach is 3-35-1. And anybody can make the excuses they want, blaming Sashi Brown, blaming the talent that's on the field. At the end of the day, he's the head coach. And when you look at all the close games that they've been in since 2016, they're 2-10-1 in games 3 points or less. And it's the worst percentage in the National Football League by any team. That's unacceptable. If you're in a close game, it's up to you as the head coach to make the right decisions, make the right calls, regardless if you're the offensive coordinator, defense or not, which he was for a time. You got to win these close games. You win these close games, momentum shifts in the league, and you can start piling up wins. And obviously, Hue Jackson's not doing that. And it's frustrating that, and I walk into work And everybody's like, man, the Browns lost another close game. And I'm like, yeah, if we had better coaching, we would be in a better situation. And I honestly feel that way. I think if we had any other coach, any one of these other coaches in the National Football League, we would be in a better situation. Look in Buffalo with Sean McDermott. He's got probably their version of what the Browns were the last 2 seasons. They beat Minnesota Vikings, and they won another game. They won 2 games with a terrible quarterback room and a terrible roster. And because McDermott gets the most out of his players, obviously Hue Jackson doesn't. So, I'm staying on red alert until he gets fired, because I think it could come down any moment. And I think enough is enough, and it's time for a change.
Yeah, I agree. It's time for a change as well. And, there's stuff going on in press conference yesterday, and Hugh might take over the play calling. He seemed to have clarified that today, that he's not going to do that. But, I'm just done. It's, when you're the head coach of this team, majority of everything falls on you. And, when you have a young team on this, it's your job to win those close games. You said they're 2-10-1. You at least have to go 500, at least in close games like that. You have to pull out those victories. And, he's just – I can't even say he's a mediocre head coach. He's below average. He's terrible. There's a guy on Bull and Fox today. You tweeted out the quote calling Hugh one of the premier head coaches in this league. Are you kidding me? This dude is 3-35-1 as a head coach with the Browns. I think, what did he win? 8 games in Oakland? He went 8-8 in Oakland. So
yeah, he went 8-8.
He's 11-43-1 as a head coach in the NFL. I saw a stat yesterday that Bill Belichick would have to lose over 1,000 games in a row to have the same winning percentage as Hue Jackson. That's insane. So, I'm done with Hue Jackson. I'm curious to see who they're going to find to replace him. But, this situation has gone on for way too long. I think we all expected him to be gone at the end of last year after going 0-16. But, when they changed everything with the front office, I was somewhat okay with it to see if he could do something with real NFL talent out there, and it appears that he hasn't done so at all.
Right. And, I want to go back to, what he said yesterday. First of all, he needs to stop telling us he's the head coach of the Browns. We know you're the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, Hugh. Quit saying it so many times. He said it, I think, literally 6 times in a sentence yesterday. And, he may not have tried to say, to throw Todd Haley in the bus, but he essentially did, saying that, he was going to step in and help. And then he tries to take credit for saying that, he stepped in and helped with special teams. And now the special teams has gotten better, which it has to a degree. But, if he's trying to say, he's a better offensive coordinator than Todd Haley, and he goes, I'm an expertise, I'm qualified. In the 2 years that he was the offensive coordinator, essentially for the Browns, they averaged 15.5 points a game. This year, they're averaging a little under 22 points a game under Todd Haley. Obviously, there's more talent. I won't disagree with that. But, Todd Haley is more qualified as an offensive play caller, and he has a better track record of success.